All right. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Good to meet you.
Likewise. So, tell me a little about yourself, where you come from, your history, and how you got into film and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in New England and have just been pursuing film my whole life, honestly. First
Okay.
as an actor, and then as a filmmaker, kind of out of high school, and went to college in New York at a liberal arts school called Sarah Lawrence, which had a great film program. And
Okay.
then relocated down south where I live now. So I'm calling in from the Charlotte area where my
Nice.
wife's a native, and have been living and working here for the last 15 plus years, and
Okay.
raised our family here, and
Nice.
have been pursuing a career in film really ever since, which for most of us means you work for yourself doing freelance work, or I have a company now called
Yeah.
Protagonist that does documentary work for small businesses, and but I've worked for production companies, worked for agencies, and so I've done a lot of the various types of commercial side of the business to make ends meet, and all the while pursuing my feature film work,
Yeah.
which I've made three now, um,
Nice.
two as a writer director, one being Long December, which just came out and which we're here sort of talking about, and then I made another one as a writer producer. And those are all marathons, so they take years to get off the ground, build, create, and then bring to market. So I've been
Yeah.
at it for a while.
Okay. And what was the film scene like in New England?
Oh gosh, there wasn't much. Now in Connecticut, South Windsor, Connecticut specifically, Connecticut's a funny state. You're basically between New York and Boston. So the state, half of it feels like a New York suburb, the other half feels like a
Hmm.
Boston suburb, and I was kind of in the middle.
Okay.
And ended up kind of in the going to school in New York. So a lot of the great kind of
Okay.
culture and arts that came through town was sort of part of the whole kind of New England, New York area. There really wasn't a lot of film going on. There was actually some great theater, some great music, and
Okay.
but film was really popping in New York, which is really where I sort of cut my teeth, and
Okay.
stayed around there for a couple years after college. But then when we got married, my wife and I, we started having kids. We wanted to be closer to family in a cheaper part of the country, and frankly, I was the Charlotte film scene was growing at the time, and I thought I could be a bigger
Yeah.
fish in a smaller pond, so I came south.
Yeah. I know that Charlotte's one of the kind of the hubs. My dad has been in industry for a while, and it seems like obviously LA, New York, but Charlotte, Atlanta have been some
Sure.
kind of growing markets. So when you
Mhm.
were young, what were there some films that caused you to want to get into film? Like, what was the catalyst that like this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good question. There's a series of them. Before I was even conscious of having opinion about art, I was sort of
Yeah.
thrust on the stage as an actor. Like in
Okay.
kindergarten, I was sort of picked to be, there in the school play, the main kid saying most of the lines, and that would kind of happen
Nice.
until at second grade, it happened enough where I was like, oh, this is actually fun. I want to be an actor. And I pursued acting on the stage throughout my whole childhood and took it professionally, even as a high schooler. And
Yeah.
so
Wow.
there was the professional side of me saying, I want a career as an
Mm.
actor, and theater was the easiest thing I had access to, but it was always movies that I wanted to be in. And then as
Yeah.
kids, my brother and I watching like Indiana Jones was probably the first
Oh
thing that
yeah.
we saw that it's like, oh, we want to make movies like this, and we did. We made our own Indiana Jones ripoffs, and then we
Come on.
made our own Terminator 2 ripoff, and then
Come on.
Die Hard ripoff. So we were like into action and adventure, my brother and I. And actually, it was
Yeah.
funny. As a kid, I was the actor. My brother was the movie director.
Okay.
That's what he wanted to be. And by
So
high
kind of you're
school,
shooting on like VHS,
VHS,
big
absolutely.
bigs. Yeah.
and then we would graduate to video 8, but this
Okay.
was, this was, I was born in 81, so we're talking late 80s, 90s. And
Yeah.
eventually my brother became a musician. He kind of left film and dove into music. He's 2 years older than
Okay.
me, and he's still pursuing music. He's a great singer songwriter. Actually wrote some of the songs for Long December, the film. But
Oh, right on.
he moved on to music, and I stuck with film and sort of graduated from wanting to be an actor to wanting to be a director. But it was those movies
Okay.
that we loved and wanted to rip off and make, and then
Nice.
I really became a student of the art form and just dug into a lot of the greats. Tarantino was brand new, when I was a kid, and
Okay.
he was, of course, a revelation to any of us wanting to sort of follow the art form. And then I got
Yeah.
into the classics like, Kubrick and Scorsese, and then Kurosawa
Yeah.
became a big influence when I studied film in college, got really exposed to the great history. Charlie Chaplin, I was a huge nut for a
Yeah.
while. Hitchcock became my favorite director, probably still is to this day. So
Okay.
have really become sort of a cinephile and a lover of the art form.
Nice. There's a guy I go to church with here. His name's Ben John. He said you guys did some ministry together in a Morning Star back in the day.
Ben
And
McCall.
you got it. And he said to tell you these lyrics. My phone's dead, so I don't know them exactly, but something like I'm gonna break my thumb and beat the drum until every lost one is saved or something. He said to tell
Wow.
you those lyrics. He said he was jamming that tune recently.
So I was a one-hit wonder in the worship scene back in
Okay.
2000, and yeah, that was my hit. I mean, I'm saying that tongue in
Nice.
cheek, but
So
yeah, yeah.
you have a music background as well.
Uh, yes, it never rose to a level that I never wanted to pursue it professionally. Maybe one brief moment I had fantasies of financing my films through music. I was a good enough songwriter performer to kind of really enjoy it and really play with some incredible musicians. But it was
Yeah.
never a serious. It was a serious pursuit for a while, but it was never really a full time vocational pursuit. A sense of calling, like film always was and
Yeah.
remains. But I really, so yes, so between high school and college, I took 2 years off and I went to a ministry school in Charlotte where I met Ben. I met John Mark McMillan, who's in our film. So 24
That's
years ago,
that's
I
how
met,
I found out about your film. John posted on Instagram,
yeah.
and I was like, well, I respect what he does, so I'm like, I gotta watch this because if he's in it and advocating for it, it's probably dope.
And John Mark's by far our biggest, sort of actor who's got a large following, very successful
Okay.
musician. There's a lot of musicians in the film, but he and I have
Yeah.
been close for 25 years through that Morning Star connection. We were all sort of ministry school students together, and music really. I was a music fan. I loved music growing up. I mean, I was a U2 Radiohead guy, and but really starting writing and playing was after high school with those guys. Played a lot with Ben, and it was funny just thinking about him the other day in some of his songs. And then it's music's always stayed a constant love, and I've always enjoyed every now and then picking up the guitar or the piano and just writing something, fleshing stuff out, maybe even recording. But it became, I think, what it should have become in my life, which was just sort of an emotional outlet. It was never sort of a vocational pursuit, but it was
Okay.
there enough and deep enough to when I wanted to make another film, and I wanted to make this film specifically, I was really
Yeah.
jonesing for to play in the music world, not just surround myself with musicians and make a film set in the music industry, but actually write some songs and co-write some songs and help produce some songs. And I was like, I wanted to show off my friends who were incredible musicians, but I kind of wanted to play with them as well. So I was like, I'm gonna make
Yeah.
a music film.
Nice.
But yeah.
Well, and yeah, and we'll dig into Long December in a second, but talk about your, with your ministry background and your, you obviously have a gift. I feel like, some people have a gift and then some people have an anointing. I feel like you have when I watched that film, I was like, this is an anointed film.
Huh.
And it's not, not proclaiming to be any sort of a Christian film.
Yeah.
Although anybody with eyes to see could see that it's just drenched with just good spirit-filled stuff, even if it's not in your face. But talk about maybe what you feel you led to do as a believer, and faith, how you see faith and entertainment interacting, and maybe how you see that landscape changing with,
Mm.
a lot of films that are coming out of Nashville and the South, and just the, just like general receptivity now, even by industry professionals, to start making faith-based films based off the demand and receptivity to it all.
It's a good question, and it's always my faith is a growing, evolving, progressing dynamic within me. I still
Sure,
consider myself a Christian. I am a very different Christian than I was even when Ben knew me.
sure.
And that time of my life, that was several Thomases ago. But it's
I
I've
got,
always
I got a few.
but I do very much think about the integration of faith and art
Yeah,
all the time. And as a kid, it was sort of, as a lover of film and someone who at first wanted to be an actor but then wanted to be a director, I was conscious of wanting that for the sake of the art itself. I wanted to
yeah,
make movies because I loved movies, and I was
yeah,
conscious of people in my church or my Christian school projecting a sense of evangelism onto it. And they would say things like,
totally.
be a light to that industry. And I remember kind of having a tension with that because
Yeah,
even at a young age, I was conscious of the whatever light is in me will shine in the work I do, and
that's true.
I'm not even thinking about strategically
Yes,
trying to shine the light. I'm just
yeah,
making art. And in fact, my
yeah.
first film, Fair, I made in 2017, is a rather dark, hard R rated thriller that
Okay,
I would call a Christian film because it is wrestling with truths, and it is, and in some cases attempting to provide answers, but really raising more questions. Like Augustine,
yeah.
whatever said, Saint Augustine said, "Whatever is true is Christian." And so I really took that to heart.
Wow.
And that first film's about the struggle to remain married. I mean, it's about the
Okay,
tensions of marriage, and so it's a
beautiful.
tough, sort of subject matter, and it's very adult
What's the name of
language.
that film?
It's called Fare, Fare. It's about an Uber driver
Okay.
who finds himself driving the man who's secretly sleeping with his wife, and it's sort of
Wow.
this love triangle inside a car. But like
Wow.
Flannery O'Connor is a huge influence on me as a writer who happens to be a Christian, not writing Christian, art necessarily. And
Yes.
her essays on kind of the integration of faith and art are incredible.
Yeah.
Same with Madeline Leangle. She said the
Yeah. Great.
line that I named my production company after. She said, "Bad art is bad theology." And so
That's good. Yeah.
I created a film company called Bad Theology because it's this idea that, like, if our theology is what we believe about God, transcendence, the unknown source,
Yeah.
and religion then becomes how how we enact what we believe.
Yeah.
And if all good religion is hopefully bringing us towards a more global view as opposed to a tribal view, through things like service, solidarity, sacrifice, that's good religion. And our art as makers, as artists, we are our action is to create. And so whatever we create is going to reflect an inner life more than anything we say. So I was always conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I'm always sort of,
Yeah.
that's always at the forefront of my mind in the work that I make.
Yeah.
But it's never with sort of an evangelical sort of message or bent. And
Yeah.
I think of the priests in my life who say there is no sacred, there is no profane, it is all one. And I really agree with that. There's good art and bad art, which is largely a subjective argument. But it's there is not Christian nor non-Christian art.
Yeah.
There's
I've
there's
always loved that John
truth lies.
John Foreman response to a question he asked. He was asked about his songs, and it's like, are you asking if my songs are saved by the blood of Jesus and baptized? Like, it's a silly question. It's kind of especially for artists that are dedicated to art.
Yeah.
Art for the sake of evangelism. can quickly become propaganda and be received as propaganda and feel like, it's why Christian films have been so bad for so long. It's
Sure.
because they're not really made by filmmakers. They're made by pastors who are trying to put sermons into film
Yeah.
form, but they haven't really done the time to study and understand how you make a great film and how the art form works.
I would
Recently
agree
kind
with
of
that.
gotten, yeah. Uh, Go ahead.
And yeah, I would agree with that. And because there are Christian films, most of them, a lot of them we see, it's clear, oh, this filmmaker doesn't love the art form for its own sake. Like that's just so
Yes.
clear when you meet an artist who loves the art form for its own sake. It's clear, it's evident, and it doesn't mean Christian films, even how they're made, shouldn't be made, but it does. It's worth drawing a distinction, exactly like you said. There's and like I've worked with some Christian filmmakers who, in their defense, they even say, "Hey, we're not artists. We actually see ourselves as pastors, as evangelists,
Yeah.
and we're going to use the medium of film to kind of craft our message." That's not what I do.
Yeah.
But that's just as valid. At least they're understanding
Sure.
that there's a difference between the artist and the pastor. But for the
Yeah.
church to basically, say all artists need to be evangelists, I don't agree with.
Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of recently dealt with some stuff, because I put out worship albums, I put out gospel albums, I'm just an artist and a musician, and so I just create,
Yeah.
and like you described, look, if I have Christ living in me, then what I'm going to make it's just going to naturally flow out. But I've had some people come in. It's like they thinking that they know you from a church perspective, a Christian perspective, and then begin to make comments about, oh, if you'll just get back to praising the Lord, well, then He'll elevate you. As if like, I'm trying to make other things. It's a strange thing for the artist. It's like you don't understand. Like I'm not making things to try and achieve X, Y, Z. I'm just making
Mhm.
things,
Right.
as a. So, have you had experience with that? Maybe some naysayers from the church having to contend. I know I have some of those voices in my head. Any experience with that?
Honest, thankfully, it's been. I'm sure there are cases of that. I've always sort of been the guy. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, but a just a well balanced religious upbringing where my parents
Yeah, yeah,
were, they introduced me to the arts. They were very pro arts parents, and now living in the Bible Belt, I am aware that there is this some sort of southeast sort of um, subgenre of Christianity that's just different from the rest of the parts of the West Coast, the
sure,
Northeast. So some of that is
yeah,
cultural,
sure,
but I was always the guy sort of going for film for its own sake, and I was never pursuing it within sort of the Christian world, and
yeah,
because they're frankly two different industries. So my connections, my path, the films I would make were always within the art house independent film world. So by
okay,
and large, the experience I got was from within that world, with
yeah,
comments about, man, your stuff's really, it's rich, it's provocative, it's causing me to think
right,
and question.
right,
I can't, I honestly can't think of a conversation where someone who is extremely conservative or fundamentalist was sort of criticizing what I was doing,
that's good,
because it wasn't Christian enough. Thankfully, I haven't really had a lot of those arguments, or if I have, maybe they've
that's good.
just been so insignificant they've kind of come and gone.
That's good. That's good. I'm happy for you in that regard. That can be pretty maddening sometimes,
It's
but
also probably,
um,
it's not like I've hit a certain level of notoriety where I'm inviting all of that criticism. I mean, let's be clear, I'm a very, mid-level struggling filmmaker who's still, supports his family
yeah,
through making, business documentaries. So maybe if I had a
yeah.
wider reach with my films, I would have a lot more of the criticism. But
The
a lot of,
haters are coming out the woods.
I mean, my films get reviewed by critics, and there's some criticism about it as art, and I appreciate that. Sometimes
Sure.
I'll even agree and be like, "Yeah, you're right. I missed it there." But
Yeah,
it's if the criticism stays around the art, and there's a perspective of the art that they kind of can comment on, like a critic. Hopefully, a good critic has that perspective. Then I don't mind that at
yeah.
all.
You said you have a family. How many kids you have?
Yeah, I got a wife and 3 kids. They're 12, 14, and 17. So middle schoolers and high schoolers. Yeah.
Boys, girls?
I got my oldest is a daughter. She's pursuing film. She's incredible. She's way better than I was at her age. And then I got two
Wow,
boys.
nice. I myself have three girls,
Oh wow.
9, 3, and 6 months, and I feel the same about my daughter in her artistic abilities. She's just like leaps and bounds beyond. It's really
And
cool to watch.
it's cool because my daughter grew up around it because of me, but it was she didn't want to pursue it until it came alive inside of her, until she kind of discovered
Okay,
it on her own, which she did through our high school. And
okay,
then once that opened up, obviously I helped foster that, and I've helped guide her and just teach her what I know, but it was never something I
yeah,
pushed on her or even she showed
yeah,
interest in, so which is kind of cool.
yeah. Well, talk about that as an artist. Something I know for me, it was always something really scary. I never even knew how I could ever afford an engagement ring kind of thing. But then it just seemed like as you move into marriage and move into fatherhood, there are sacrifices that have to be made. And I thought you really did a very nice job in the film, which again we'll talk about in a second. But of just portraying the struggle there, the internal struggle of feeling like, um, is the dream dead? What is the dream? Redefining the dream, and then just the dynamic of being an artist, parent, and husband, and family leader, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the film's about an artist chasing the dream, and it's definitely thematically autobiographical. It's not literally. I was never a music artist pursuing the dream, but it's a metaphor for my own artist journey, and honestly, it's a metaphor for every artist journey that I've sort of
Oh yeah,
asked those of us who are, you're older than having just started, but your break really hasn't quite happened, and there's a point where you start asking, will it ever happen?
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, my own it's like, I got married young and I had a lot of success young, like validating success. It's one thing for those
yeah,
of us who have dreams and they just kind of never coalesce. You try your
yeah,
album, you try your film, your book, or whatever, and there's really nothing there. You kind of get it pretty early. You start to realize, hey, maybe this isn't for me. Let me go pursue something else. And
yeah.
in some
Well, and
case,
we all have these. We may not we may not know it till it's articulated, but we have these guideposts in our head of what success may or may not even look like,
sure.
which I don't even know if that's helpful, but that's
Yeah.
how we measure whether the thing did well or not, regardless of, it could have touched somebody's life. It could have done any number of things, but because we have XYZ as like, this is the metric and it didn't do that, well, then I'm a failure,
Yeah. And it's like I had enough success to kind of keep me going and validate at least some sort of skill or artistry, and but not enough to where it made it financially,
Sure.
less volatile or feeling like I had sort of broken through. And a lot of that is based, I think, on unhealthy expectations or definition of what success is. And I can only
Yeah.
speak for myself, who's a very ambitious person who
Yeah.
had big dreams, clear dreams, and like you said, those
Yeah.
guideposts were as big as it gets. And
Yeah. No,
so I'm like actively, strategically trying to build a career toward that and having
yeah.
enough success that's sort of getting me there, but not enough to where it feels like it's really turning a corner. And then there's a point where it just starts to sour and you just are at it for year after year after year. and
Yeah.
and and for me, there was the beginning of what was sort of a 10-year crisis period, which I'm kind of in
Okay.
year 10 of. Was I
I
was I
feel you.
was I was working for this company that it was within the TV industry, so it was very much a job within my world and skill set, but it
That's good.
wasn't it so it was very fulfilling in a lot of ways, but it was also just a step on the road for me, and I was conscious of that. And everyone who knew me knew, if they hired me, I'm on limited time because my ambition is this. And
Okay.
so that was just always how I was. And there was a point where that job changed very rapidly for me, and it became kind of a soul crushing sort of place to work. And I was like, now's the time to go off on my own and really try to
Yeah.
start making features. I'd made a ton of other kinds of films and television. I wanted to
Yeah.
make my own independent feature films. And in 2015, I risked financial ruin and basically encountered financial ruin by jumping off the deep end with
Yeah.
my wife's blessing, who's my biggest champion, and quitting this very well-paying, comfortable job to launch Bad Theology, my independent film company, and go off on my own. And that began a
Yeah.
10-year period of real intense identity crisis and just learning, failing and
Yeah.
learning so much of these ideas and this, hope and growing in emotional health, learning how to redefine success,
Nice.
and coming towards the end of this chapter and making a film like Long December that's very much about being content with what we have and redefining what that future
Yeah.
looks like, and not defining it binary. That's
That's
how I
good.
look. That's how I looked at
Yeah.
success. It's like
Yeah.
I either make it or I don't, and it's a very
Yeah.
unhealthy way to look
Yeah.
at success, and it's very an anti-contemplative way. I'm a I'm very much a contemplative, Richard Rohr kind of believer, and so I'm trying to live a more
I'm a fan.
contemplative life. Say that
Yeah.
again.
I'm a fan of Richard Rohr. I read Universal Christ. It's a great
Yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah. He's very much a spiritual influence in my life,
Yeah.
and so Long December is very much a contemplative film. Is just trying to live contemplatively and not and trying to shed all the unhealthy sort of definitions of success that I had.
It's great.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's still I'm still in it, man. If I'm going to be honest, you
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, you're and that's kind of why we set the film. It's called Long December. We set it at Christmas because that's
Yeah.
the time of year for a lot of us artists. It's there's a sadness to the end of the year because you're
Yeah.
conscious of the
Yeah.
hopes you had that did or did not happen, and you're scared to hope into the new year. And
Wow.
I'm there were years where it was very dark for me with
I
that
bet.
hope, that heavy hope, and that's a song we wrote for this film, Heavy Hope. But
Oh, it's
uh,
great. That was one of my favorite. That was one of my favorite lines from the movie. 'Cause I just felt it so heavy. It was just
mm,
like it's a heavy thing to carry. Hope is a heavy thing to
yeah,
carry.
it is,
And
and
it's looked at as this beautiful thing, but the Bible says hope deferred makes the heart grow sick.
mm,
And I think a lot of, especially artists, we definitely know about deferred hope. We live our whole life sometimes with deferred hope.
yeah, yeah, and as we look in the new year now, I mean, there's hopes that I have, but I'm in some ways you try not to hope too much. That's sort of the other. That's the painful side of it, right? If you hope too much, you're heartbroken, and then you
Yeah,
get desensitized and numb, and you're like, I'm not going to hope at all, and then you're just despondent. So
yeah.
I made a movie about it. I certainly haven't figured it out.
Well, you definitely contemplated the thing well enough to really hit home with me and others. So when did you begin Long December? When did you start pre-production? What kind of sparked the idea?
Sure.
Like I'm gonna make this movie now.
Made it in 2021, and
Okay.
it's finally coming out now. It actually, I mean, it's very a thematic kind of birth because there was another project that I was making. I was in active pre-production for um, a project that I thought was going to be my big break. It was very much
Okay.
on the path. That script, this other project, got me signed to a big agency. I had a real
Nice.
cast of actors who were noteworthy. We had a real budget.
Yeah.
It was all coming together for me, and I was like, I'm done with freelance. I'm gonna make this film, and then I'm gonna just make films forever because this will be that successful.
Yeah.
People
You're
will
plugged in.
call them.
Yeah.
All of us film school kind of like kids think that way, and it's just not how it works. You
Yeah.
struggle making film after film, and maybe you'll get lucky and make it. But I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I was like, my first film was the Fair, the one I talked about the Uber driver. I
Yeah.
made it. It went out in the world. It was successful relative to its scale, but it didn't it opened up small doors for me, didn't open up wide doors for me. Then I made this sci-fi
Okay.
thriller that I ended up sharing kind of the creative load with, didn't end up directing that. And that opened up a little more doors, but not a lot. And so this film, this was going to
What?
open up all the doors.
Okay. What was the sci-fi one called?
That's called Minor Premise. So
Okay.
Fair and Minor Premise are out in the world, and you can watch them on. I'm not sure what platforms they're on
Yeah.
currently, but they're out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
and and this next this and so this third film was really going to be the big break. And again, I was in active prep. We were 6 weeks from shooting, and then
Okay.
COVID hit. So this was
Oh, okay. Yeah.
2020. So the whole industry froze, and then
Yeah.
as over the summer, as we were all waiting to go back to work, that the financier pulled out, and that
Wow.
whole project fell apart.
Oh man.
And with that, my identity fell apart.
Sure.
Like I was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. This is the
This is
plan
the
is
ticket.
working.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is my ticket.
Yeah.
And I spent a year trying to rebuild that project. And again, it
Oh
was like
wow.
it was hot enough within the industry that it's like it always had a little heat on it, and I was always kind of lured to the idea that it was just around the corner. And but
Yeah.
then summer 2021, I finally was like, I have to let this go for my own heart. Like it's
Okay.
not happening now, and I have
Yeah.
to stop trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
I have to I need a break. I'll come back to it
Yeah.
sometime, but I need a break. And so
Okay.
once I finally let that film go, emotionally, logistically, stop pursuing
Yeah.
it, it was like I suddenly could consider another project. And because I was like, I got to make something. Like the beast is needs to be fed. I got to go make a
Sure.
movie. And
Yeah.
waiting in the shadows of that project collapsing was Long December, which was just an idea at the time. And
Okay.
because I, I had always wanted to make kind of a music film. That was as
Yeah.
much of the idea that was there. And like any
Okay.
given time, there's 10 ideas in my head. That was always one. Oh, a small little music
Yeah.
film. But at that
Okay.
moment in
And
time in 2021, I was like, I want to make that, but I want to make it small. I want to make it where
okay.
I live. I want to make it with
Yeah.
the people I live, and
Yeah.
make it a community film. Raise a couple $100,000 because that's probably about what I thought I could scrape together. That's kind of the
Okay.
minimum I could really make this for. And that was summer. That began a very quick process. Once I committed, I'm going to make this film, and once I got my actors, Stephen Williams, who plays my lead actor, and John Mark
Yeah.
McMillan, who
Great.
plays a supporting actor. These are friends of mine. They are both musicians, and they're both acting
Okay.
for the first time in my film. That was the idea. I want to make a film
Are
about
they?
musicians, starring musicians, and
They're both local there too.
yeah,
In
yeah.
Charlotte area. Okay.
Yep, we all live in the same city here, and when we were
Nice.
all going to church together,
Okay.
and so I basically had to get them on board because they were apprehensive. They were like, I don't know if I want to
Okay.
be in a movie, like they didn't have dreams of acting, and
Okay.
they frankly they had a lot to lose if I made them look bad.
Okay.
But I convinced them, and they signed on, and that was like summer 2021, and we were shooting within a few months. The money came together very
Wow.
quickly. Everything
Yeah.
kind of came together so fast, and we filmed this Christmas 2021, and then I spent 2022 editing the film, and then 2023 it premiered at Heartland Film Festival, and it started its festival tour. That tour finished up this past spring, and then we sold it over the summer to a distributor, and
Yeah.
it just came out last month, and so now it's out on digital
Yeah.
platforms where you can rent it or purchase it. We'll hopefully have a streaming release next year, on a subscription streaming service, because that's where
Okay.
most people watch movies these days. People are like, wait, I have to rent it? How do I do that?
Yeah.
But so hopefully it'll be on a streaming platform within the
Okay.
next year.
So your fundraising process, was that something difficult? Something you've done before? Where did you look for that? I know
Yeah,
that's a big thing. A conversation my wife and I are having all the time as filmmakers and artists and stuff.
yeah. So I kind of I've been raising money for films for the last 10 years, and when I kind of quit that day job that I mentioned and went off on my own, started Bad Theology. That's where we started raising money, and raised a little bit, but realized how much we didn't know about the process.
Okay.
And in some ways, Long December, it it the money came fairly quickly, partly because I had just gotten better at doing it, but also a lot of the investors I was talking to were people I had been talking to for years, and
Okay.
with a lot of investors, it's just timing. It's like the timing kind of aligned, and they
Okay.
were excited about this film. It was good timing for them, and it was a lot of. I wouldn't say it was a friends and family raise, but it was kind of one circle out from the friends and family sort of
Okay.
raise, where at this level, kind of the sub million, half a million level for films, you are raising money from a dozen plus different sources at anywhere from a $10,000 to $50,000 investment.
Okay.
Um, and 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 so when you do that, you're approaching people who have the means to invest, who are okay losing it, and you're very honest and transparent that this is volatile, high risk. You
Yeah.
should invest with some other desire, like supporting the arts,
Yeah.
supporting me, and
Yeah.
because it's going to be very hard to, hopefully I will not lose your money. Hopefully I'll break even. Maybe if we're lucky, well, I'll make a little bit. So,
Yeah.
and those are the conversations you have, and they're just over years. I've had those conversations with anybody I've come across who has had the means to write a check,
Yeah.
and so when Long December was the next project up that I was raising money for, it came together pretty quick, and I ended up raising 300 grand to make the
Wow.
film. So we had attorneys involved. We were not just doing handshakes. We're doing proper investor agreements, and
Okay. Yeah.
they help. They have very defined ownership of the film, and the terms of how they're paid. Is all very clear, and
Yeah.
but it's also that's also a process that only you can is only sustainable if you're making returns for these investors. So um it's and it's a hard thing to do, and when you're at a larger level of independent film, kind of 1 to 2 million and plus, I mean, you can raise any amount that way. It just becomes a lot harder. It takes a lot longer raising that amount of money from those smaller chunks. So at the higher level, you're getting financing companies involved and companies that actually write checks for film, and the
Yeah.
calculus is a lot different, where they're just looking at the script and the actors, and they're deciding, okay, is this project fit our model? But
Yeah.
the micro indie world, you're kind of doing it, a little by little with friends and family.
I see. Talk about some of the locations. One I noticed, I think, is is it Will Reagan studio you guys used for some of those?
We did, yeah. Pink Moon.
Right. Pink
Good
Moon.
eye.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's in
Um,
Knoxville. It's
that's in Knoxville. Yeah.
it's pretending to be a studio in Nashville. So the
Yeah.
character in the film goes to Nashville. So I'll talk about Will Reagan briefly. My music producer. So this is a music film.
Yeah.
It's about an artist chasing a dream, and it's 75% song. We really just wanted to tell a simple story about,
Yeah.
the pain of the dream, and just fill it with great music, starring
Yeah.
musicians. And we wrote songs for the film. We rearranged old Christmas carols. We repurposed old songs. But in all cases, we captured the recording of the songs live on camera, where the artists are actually
Oh
performing
wow.
right there. Nothing's lip synced. And so
Wow. That's what I was going to ask about that because it's really, really done well.
Good, good, good. Well, we did that for the authenticity. Hopefully, that comes across when something's real and in the moment, but also economically. We were going to have to pre-record
Sure.
the songs and lip sync to them. That was actually going to take longer and cost us more. So let's just
Okay.
record them on the day. And because they were all supposed to sound live, the messiness of live recording and mic bleed and all of that, we were fine with, because that's kind of what we were going
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Kevin Daly was my music producer, and he's an old friend.
Okay.
He's in Nashville. He's a prolific producer, composer, artist in
Nice.
Nashville. He's from Charlotte, so I've known him since he was a teenager, and I needed kind of a music guru to help me curate the soundtrack, but then help me arrange and produce the soundtrack. Because I just had the idea.
Yeah.
I was like, this is what I want, and I want to be involved, but I need a pro like you, Kevin. And also, he
Yeah.
composed some of the score that kind of glues some of the songs together. And
Right.
then this particular scene when our character goes to Nashville, we needed a nice studio that we had access to, and there was some in Nashville we could have gone to, but Will Reagan's close friends with Kevin Daly. They play
I
together
got
all the time, and Kevin's always at Pink Moon. And so he's like, hey, we could go half the distance to Nashville and just go to Knoxville and record this scene. And
you. Yeah.
Will graciously, was game to let us film there, and he's in it. He plays the engineer at the desk.
I spot I spotted him there. I was like, there he is.
There's
That's
well,
kind of how that's kind of how I knew it was his, because I'd seen some of Pink Moon shots on Instagram and stuff, and then I saw Will, and I was like,
yeah.
oh, I bet that's that spot.
So and then the other locations were all the Charlotte area. So we
Okay.
Charlotte city proper, the Irish pubs in downtown Charlotte, and the big music venue scene halfway through is at a music venue in
Yeah.
Charlotte. Charlotte's a border city, so right in the south border is the North Carolina South Carolina line. I actually live right below Charlotte in a suburb called Fort Mill, South Carolina, and
Yeah.
we filmed 75% of the movie in Rock Hill and Fort Mill, and then we did 3 days in Charlotte and then 1 day in Knoxville.
Okay.
So
Nice.
the apartment is in Rock Hill. Some of the dive bars in Rock Hill that's supposed to be in Nashville. The Irish pubs in Charlotte. But those
Yeah.
streets where he's driving around, that's all kind of Christmas lit. That's all Rock Hill and Fort Mill. But it was,
Now the scene.
it was here at home. It was like I was waking up, in my house, having breakfast with my kids, and then going and making the movie and coming home.
That's great.
And that's kind of how I wanted it.
Yeah, that's awesome. The scene where they're about to get in the car and he's about to head back from Nashville and it starts snowing. Uh, did that just happen randomly? That seemed like a pretty money potential miraculous moment there. Did you have to wait on that happening? Did you time that? How did that work out?
That was visual effects, brother.
No, no, wow, really
Now,
nice job with the effects.
now the key to visual effects is what the problem that you often why it doesn't look like visual effects is because we got lucky
Yeah.
with an overcast day. So but it was an
Okay. Yeah.
overcast day. So if you're filming outside and you want it to look snowy, you cannot make the sun look overcast. It's not
Yeah.
going to work. So thankfully, it was a very overcast day. Actually, it might have even been a rainy day. And so
Well,
when
it
he's
seemed like a
driving
rainy day.
back on the highway, it was rainy, which was perfect.
Oh,
So adding in
okay.
snow, it was a visual effect it was real snow because you can
Yeah.
basically buy snow visual effect that's just
Okay.
images of snow falling, and if it's against black you can
Like an
take out the
alpha,
black.
they call it
Exactly,
an
you can
alpha.
just integrate it really easily. So these weren't digital flakes, it was real snow, but it was purchased from a library and it was
Yeah.
integrated. And when he's driving, there was it was like snow as if you were looking through a windshield, and
Yeah.
I didn't even pay. It worked so perfectly. I did it myself, dude, and I'm not even a visual
Oh, wow.
effects guy. Like it
Yeah.
just, and that's where the marriage of I have the perfect visual asset, and if I put
Yeah.
it over the perfect thing we captured, which was overcast, wet, and the two together, and then you just dial in the snow so it doesn't look very clear. It's a little blurred. It's a little
Yeah. Yeah.
opaque. It
Okay.
it looks real, and 100% of people think it's real snow. And
I mean, it fooled me, and it was so perfect. I was like, no way that it's just like
yeah,
this is real. This is no
and
money for this moment.
and it was written that way, and because I was like, it's a Christmas movie, I got to have snow, just because I was just for the kind of the fun
Yeah.
wink to the genre. And
Yeah.
but it was something that we were going to abandon if the weather, if we were
Yeah.
shooting and it was sunny, we weren't going to try it. We're like, we missed it. But because we lucked out with the overcast, I was like, hey, we can try it, we can do it. And if it looks crappy, we can just cut the scene. It's not really
It
germane to
was
the
just
story.
such a, and I can't imagine it without snow. Like it's just the perfect moment, especially after that conversation. To me, that was one of the best I mean, like that film spoke to me so much. Like in just my journey and where my head's been at for the last, like you described, that 10-year period. Like I can relate. So that's why this film hit me so hard, because it's like, yes, you did it. Like
I
that
appreciate it.
conversation with the guy in which he's talking about, this isn't the situation in which the manager comes
Yeah,
in and makes all your dreams. Because so many of us have, and it never goes away. Whatever show you go
yeah,
play, it doesn't matter where you are. The guy who's going to make your dreams come true is always potentially the guy who just walked through the door. And so and you think that's happening in them. And I don't want to, like, spoil
yeah,
anything
yeah.
for anybody watching it, but that was such a great conversation. And then the conversation with the guy who becomes the promoter, that
Hmm.
was it's just a great perspective all across the board, where it's just like, just a message in letting go. Just let
Yeah.
go. It doesn't mean like let the dream die or don't dream, or it just means, to
Well,
me,
like,
it was just like, let go. Stop
yeah.
squeezing so tight to something that's ethereal. Because even when he says, "Well, don't you have a dream?" I, what came to me was like, well, you got to define what the dream is, or
Hmm.
else it's this ethereal, unachievable thing. You never know if you've gotten there or not.
Yeah.
And you hit all those things. The opening scene was one of my favorite things. I laughed so hard. I won't spoil it, but that's just because we've all been there. We go places in our
Yeah.
minds, and then reality snaps back, and
Well,
it
I
was
wish
just
I
so
wish
well
all the
done.
audience was, related as much as you did, because yeah, you're exactly, the target audience there, and yeah, I mean, like that a club promoter sort of talks about, a broken dream can become a new dream is one of the things he says to him, and that's a good core thematic to kind of that idea of redefining success, and yeah, no, I mean, all of that stuff was written from stuff I've said to myself, and I was like, because my hunch was, if I make this as an active exploration and a wrestling with these tensions, it'll connect
Yes,
with anyone else who has asked these questions, and it's been
yes.
an overwhelming number.
You could just sense the real, there was no, to me, it was a perfect film, and where it's like, there was no moment where I was like, bad
There's no
choice, or
false
it could have
beat.
been a better
Yeah,
choice. And I think because I could just feel that it came, like, whoever this guy is, he knows, he's experienced all this. I can tell he knows, from all of the valleys to the mountains. Like, I felt
yeah.
it all, because, like,
Wow.
clearly you've been there. Um,
Well,
just to
that's
wrap up
high
the last
praise,
few
man.
minutes, talk. Yeah, yeah. Let's talk some technical stuff. So, who was your DP on the film?
My DP was Chris Kalman. He's an Atlanta cinematographer who I met in Charlotte. Used to be in Charlotte. Been running with him for 20 years, and we've made a
Okay.
lot of short form content, corporate content together. And
Yeah.
that big feature project that I mentioned earlier that fell apart, he was my cinematographer on that. So we had spent several years planning that, and so I've worked with other DPs, as you know, on other projects. But when this came together, I was like, Chris, I want you to shoot this for me, and
Yeah.
um, and I wanted to shoot it, very much in kind of a lo-fi kind of, very handheld, very sort of verite kind
Okay.
of, style of a film. But there was also a practical component where we're recording these songs live on camera and
Yeah.
needing to take into account how we're shooting each take, because we're creating an album and all of the
Yeah.
editing that goes with a music album alongside a
Yeah.
film. And so you can't, you'll wear out your singer's voice on certain takes, so you've got to know where the camera is, and is this a wide or is this a close up, and where is
So,
Steven, on the vocal. So Chris did an awesome
yeah.
job really honing all that.
And what did he shoot? What did you guys shoot on?
We shot on the Alexa, I was going to say Alexa 35. It might have been the Alexa Mini. This was 3 years
Okay.
ago now. Um,
Nice.
and was it the 35? I can't remember. One of our
Okay.
partners, so Bad Theology co-produced this with Caravan, which is a Charlotte-based production company that
Okay.
really is a leader in the national commercial space, and this was their
Okay.
first narrative film. And these guys, I've known them for years. We've been friends. They also own a rental house, so we
Nice.
got, as part of our co-production sort of arrangement, we got access to all their incredible gear,
Oh, very
And
good.
and so we shot on the Alexa. I want to say the Alexa 35, but if you're really a camera head, then I might be wrong about that.
Okay.
I'm not a gearhead.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
a
am
DP.
to some degree, but my camera experience is limited. Although I
Yeah.
do, find myself behind it sometimes. But so in the live music takes,
Yeah.
are they? You're doing multiple takes, multiple angles. Are you guys recording with a click to keep things cohesive
Yeah.
to
So
start the thing? Yeah.
in every take, Steven's got a tiny little earpiece in his ear with a blasting a click metronome, and so yeah, well, that's how we did it. He's so every take is rhythmic in that way,
Yeah.
and in the case, and in some cases, we're hiding microphones in places where they wouldn't normally be, like the pub, the
Okay.
apartment, because we have our production sound microphones to capture dialogue. But if we're
Right.
capturing music and then are going to mix and edit music, they're different microphones. So Kevin, my music producer, and a guy named Jacob Early, who is our engineer, anytime we were recording a song, they would hide microphones. Or if we were performing it on a live stage, then he didn't need to hide them. Those mics are actually capturing all the instruments, and they're
Yeah.
multi-tracking it just like you would a live performance. And then
Yeah.
it was really interesting because I Kevin couldn't mix or edit the songs until I had edited the scene. And so I was
Sure. Yeah.
actually editing the songs while I was editing the scene because
Right.
I wanted it, we're not lip syncing, and Steven's
Right.
doing different vocal things in each take. And so I was making decisions of like, I like this camera angle, I like this visual performance, but I like this sonic performance better. So I'm with every take,
Yeah.
I'm weighing all those things until I edited the song, which I could do because of the click track in every song. And then
Yeah.
but I'm editing the movie and I'm having to keep together all of those multi tracks of instrumentation that I'm doing nothing with, but they have to stay intact, because once I lock the edit, I'll
Right.
then send it to Kevin, who then mixes it and makes it actually sound like a song and not how
Wow.
bad raw audio can. And then
Sure.
when the edit's done and locked and the music's done, we then have to get the film mixed, which they're
Yeah.
mixing dialogue and background, but they're not doing that to the songs because that's a whole different skill set. So they had to
Yeah.
be integrated, and it was a whole process we were learning as we went, frankly. And
Yeah.
the fact that we pulled it off, I think, just showed, kudos to us for the planning, but it was also something that we figured out.
Yeah. It was very cool and just a great. Yeah. The songs were incredible. Everything about it really went well, and I was just. It was a pleasant surprise for me. It was like you never know what you're gonna stumble upon when you get a recommendation like that. But it was
So
just like
you saw
to
John
see that.
Mark just posted it, and you're like, "Let me check it out." Is that how
Yeah.
you came across it?
Yeah, yeah, because I could, I admire his work. So as an artist, I'm like, well, if he's putting his stamp on this, and he was like, he said, I think he twisted his arm to kind of be
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
in the film, and so I was like, oh well, I should check this out. And I thought, but for those two guys, or I don't know how many of those actors were in the same ballpark as your two leads, but I thought they did an incredible job not having ever been in a film. Um, sometimes when people are too trained, they can overdo things, but
yeah.
maybe that they brought a freshness and a natural
Totally.
thing to.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. All the musicians in the film are musicians who um, have never really acted before, and John Mark and Steven that had literally never acted before,
yeah,
and Steven, who carries the movie. I mean, he's the lead; he's in every scene. It was a really beautiful process collaborating with him because he just approached acting so purely, and he was sort of like reading a script, and he's just
yeah,
like, why does he say this? And I would say, well, because of this. He'd be like, oh, okay. And then if he understood why, he could just say it naturally. And if he didn't understand why,
nice.
and I couldn't
Yeah,
explain why, then it was a bad line and we would rewrite it. And
wow.
all the other actors, by contrast, are pros. And I was like,
Yeah,
Steven and John Mark, I'm going to surround you with pros, with seasoned actors. They're going to help lift you. They're
Okay.
going to be really generous with you. And it really was the case. Emily Althouse, who plays Steven's character's wife, is an incredible actress,
He was great.
very,
Yeah.
very successful. They formed an incredible chemistry. And she really helped him. Charlie, the guy who plays the manager, Max
Yeah.
Hernandez, who plays the promoter, all of these guys were pros. And it was a
What about
beautiful
the
shooting
guy?
process.
What about the guy who's the guy that does the every Saturday night thing and he sings his butt off?
Yeah,
Well, who's that?
that's Drake Margolnick, and he's an incredible musician. He plays under his a solo moniker of his last name Margolnick, but he also has a band called Flagship that just released a new record. So he's been around. He's another Charlotte guy. So he was another Charlotte musician that I knew and
Yeah.
have always been a fan of his music. And I was like, hey, Drake, can you kind of perform in this film? He's actually been in a few movies. This was not his first time acting, even though he was just performing a music.
Okay.
He's actually done proper acting before. But
Okay.
a big fan of his music. And he,
Yeah, he was great.
and Sarah DeShields is the Scottish woman playing Old Lang Syne in the Irish pub in the original
Yeah.
Gaelic. She's another
Yeah.
friend. She's from Scotland, but she lives here in the Carolinas. She's up in the mountains, and
Okay.
she's a friend. Steven and her have played together a bunch, and so there's like this community of artists that we all are kind of here in the Carolinas, and it was very much an intentional part of the vision to just make a movie with these people, and it really hopefully feels like a community made film because it really was.
Yeah. My last question is, talk about, the film landscape, the music landscape is changing big time. Kind of the old ways of doing things are changing. Maybe the kind of gatekeeper mentality thing is changing. You can do a lot yourself now and get it to a lot of people. Talk about how you see kind of film distribution and release models and business models changing on maybe how that may enable indie filmmakers to make films, or just how do you see things changing, and where do you see things going?
I don't know that I have a good vision or prediction of where it's going. You're catching me in a fairly pessimistic frame of mind about the industry because
Yeah.
of kind of how hard it was to bring Long December to market. And those
Yeah.
gatekeepers you mentioned are still very much, 90% of them are stuck in old models and they can become very disheartening to have conversations with. And 10 years ago it was like it was easier for all of us to make our art, to make an album, to make films, and so we've been doing that for 10 years, and now the market's so saturated, and now everyone's
Yeah.
fighting for attention, and social media has
Yeah.
become such an important place to get that attention, and it feels like you
Yeah.
have to have a second job just learning and perfecting the social media algorithm, which I
Yeah.
think we all agree sucks and we all hate it.
Well,
um,
that was one of my favorite lines in the movie, that conversation. I hate the
I
algorithm.
hate the
It's
algorithm.
just like, yeah.
And we wrote that, and that was 3 years ago, and it's only become more relevant. And so
Yeah.
I am frustrated with where the film industry is, and as someone trying to make a living on it. Now the good news is, if we can, I think, adapt and get out of old preconceptions of how to make a living and get our art out there,
Yeah.
if we shed those, we can actually enter into something that's new. Kind of like music's already ahead of us, because music's been very much decentralized, before film, because it's just cheaper to make music and albums than film. So it's
Sure.
there are
Yeah.
artists, who are making a living. They're not making a living selling albums, because selling albums is not really a thing anymore. They're figuring
Yeah.
it out in other ways. And John Mark, he's one of, he's my dear friend, but the most successful recording artist I know, partly because he's very talented, but he's also a sharp, hustling business guy who's figuring out
Okay.
how to make a living. And so
Cool.
on film, or kind of any art that's in the middle of a sea change, and the film industry is very much changing. 2024 will go on the record as one of the bleakest years in independent film, partly because so COVID, prior to COVID, Silicon Valley was disrupting the industry with Netflix and Prime and Apple and the
Yep.
whole streaming sea change. That was a major sea change. And then you have COVID, which changed viewing habits. And then as we're sort of
Yep.
equalizing from that, you have a writers and actors strike, which took the industry out for a year. So the industry itself, 2024, is one of the bleakest years. Nothing was getting made, nothing was getting financed, and
Wow.
everybody, all the gatekeepers were scared. But I think from out of
Wow.
this, there can be some positivity because, you know, good art is good art and it will find a way. And once, like,
Good.
long December is a good example. Once I let go of this sort of hope or dream to have it have a certain kind of release and a certain kind of exposure, I was like, you know what, this
Yeah.
is a small movie, an intimate movie, a personal movie. Let's just get it out there and it will find its audience. And
That's
kind
good.
of like the theme of the movie, I'm not going to try to, buy a new house from the revenue from this film. I'll be content just getting my film out there and I will continue,
Yeah.
quote unquote, laying tile. I don't lay tile, but that's sort of the metaphor that Steven does. I'll continue doing what
Yeah.
I do to feed my family. And,
Yeah.
you know, I can it occurred to me that I can be content making my art if I shed kind of my preconceptions of what success looks like, and
Good.
I can do it year after year. And I think because we have technology at our disposal to get it out there, it's still hard to rise above the noise, but I think good art will find a way. And so I'm optimistic
Yeah.
that the next thing I want to make will come together and I'll get it out there and, I'll keep making what I make and, do what I got to do.
Nice. Well, I think you've given us all a gift for those that watch it. Given us all a gift of, like, just take a breath. Just do what you do. It's all going to be all right, and it's a great perspective. I think in that way it'll probably be a very healing vehicle for folks, like, anxiety, depression, and all this sort of
Yeah.
stuff. People trying to keep up with the algorithm. It's exhausting, and
Yeah.
there's mental health consequences. I think it'll probably be a I know it was for me. It felt like a really healing film, and I think it's a great perspective to put out in the world right now, where everybody and their mom's trying to be famous,
Yeah.
and just too heavy of a burden to bear. And so, thanks for making that film. Thanks for taking the time, and I'm really excited. I'm excited to go watch your older stuff, and excited for what you're going to make from here on out.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Really
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity. Yeah. And you can, anyone who's listening, longdecember.movies, our website. So all the ways you can kind of watch the film are there. The soundtrack's out wherever you
Okay.
can, and you can get it. And I don't know, this isn't going to be dropped this week, is it? This episode, you'll probably take some time because this Sunday we're
It
doing an
can be.
online. Well, this
Yeah,
Sunday,
it can be.
December 15th, we're doing an online watch party. So you can actually go to longdecember.movie and register. And then December
Nice.
15th, 9 p.m. Eastern, me, Steven, John Mark, Charlie, and Max, the cast and crew, we're all going to watch the film on Zoom together. And you're invited to watch it with us and ask questions.
Nice.
And so that's happening this Sunday. But you can cut
Yeah.
this part out if you drop it next week or after. Doesn't matter to
No, I
me.
was kind of cognizant of that, just simply for the fact that it's called Long December, and
Yeah,
as
yeah,
much
yeah.
it feels like it should be watched around this Christmas time.
Yeah.
So,
But follow us on
right on, man.
Instagram
Well,
at longdecember.movie and yeah, spread the word.
very good. All right, man. I appreciate your time. God bless you, and hope to talk again soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right, man.